Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 11th Energy event, now at its new home in the NEC. Without further ado, I'll introduce the chairman of Radio 4's Today programme and Mastermind. It's John Humphrys.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim. I'm glad you mentioned Mastermind because mostly I do the Today programme. I've been doing that for 25 years, and doing that requires you to interview an awful lot of politicians. And now I'm doing Mastermind, and it's wonderful actually to be doing something so different in the sense that when you do people on Mastermind, you talk to people who actually want to answer the questions. And the contrast between that and interviewing politicians on the Today programme is pretty stark, I have to tell you. So there we are. We have another minister with us this morning. He's going to make a few remarks about the things that matter to you. At least I hope that's what he's going to be doing. And afterwards, you and I will get a chance to ask him for a few questions. So would you welcome, please, the Minister for Energy, Charles Hendry.
Thank you very much, and a great pleasure to be here at this massive conference and event today. And I want to talk about the challenge which we face in the energy sector and what the things which we're trying to do about those challenges. Because there's no doubt to me that we face the biggest energy challenge of our lifetimes. In the course of this decade, a third of our power plant in the United Kingdom is going to be coming out of commission, that we need to be looking to how we double electricity generation by 2050 because of the increased use of electric vehicles and electric heating as we decarbonise. And all of that means that in the course of this decade, we have to secure about £110 billion of investment in the electricity network and the associated parts of it, perhaps £200 billion by 2025 in the energy sector more generally. And at the same time, we have to move our economy to become a genuinely low-carbon economy as we deal with all of the issues around us of climate change. So the first reality is that doing nothing and business as usual is simply not going to be an option. And that's why we're looking at the most radical change in the electricity market in a generation. It's always possible for a market to decide between two things, between security of supply and affordability. But when it's then asked as well to factor in all of the issues of low carbon, then it's got to have greater signals from government as to the relative weight of each of those different priorities. Now, the second reality is that we can't do it without existing players, and we can't do it only with the existing players. We have to bring new entrants into this market. We've got to, there's the issue of the capital, how we're going to fund this programme, and there are investors all around the world who've never looked before at the UK energy sector, who I think we can persuade to look here and to invest here, but also the challenge in terms of the physical ability to build that new infrastructure is going to be one of the biggest issues facing us, because in the course of this decade, we have to build at twice the rate of the last decade. And if we don't do that by 2018, 2019, we will not have enough supply to meet demand. The lights will go out, or first of all, the prices will go up. And as business users, you will be the first people to feel the brunt of that. So what we have to do is we have to make this an attractive country for people to invest in. These are global companies looking at global opportunities, and if they don't see better opportunities from investing in Britain, then they will go elsewhere. So we've got to put in place a set of measures which will truly make it attractive for them to come here. And we published that document, which I think sets out how we're going to do that just before the summer, the Electricity Market Reform Package. It runs to 235 pages, and on your summer holidays, you may not have taken it with you and read every single page. So I want to just summarize. John, I know, will have done, but the rest of you may have had other books to read instead. The key elements to it, first of all, is putting a price on carbon, so that investors know that towards the end of this decade, what is going to be the price on carbon rather than the EU ETS, which has been so fluctuating and gives no basis for predictability. It's looking at long-term contracts so that people investing in low-carbon sources of electricity generation will know how much they will be paid for the electricity which they generate. And so again, giving much greater security to investors. It looks at a capacity mechanism, so ensuring that we have additional power availability in times of peak demand, or alternatively we look at ways in which we can reduce demand during those peaks in order to not require those additional power stations to be built in the first place. And it looks at an emissions performance standard as a backdrop to say that, again, this will be a legal maximum amount of emissions which power stations in the future will be able to emit. And all of that, I think, starts to put together a compelling package of financial measures, but it has to be seen against the other measures as well, because it's not just about finance, it's about planning. Planning in this country has been far too slow, far too bureaucratic. That the last time we saw a nuclear power plant built, it was over 5 years in the planning process alone. Well, we haven't got time on our side, so we're streamlining the planning system. We're making sure that we introduce a Green Investment Bank to provide support in terms of the fundraising which is going to be necessary for those companies, and looking at the skills base, working with industry to identify where the tens of thousands of skills and jobs are going to be coming from in order to enable that construction program to go forward. And our commitment to you, as people who are often going to be users rather than generators, is to deliver this low carbon, secure, affordable energy at the lowest price, because we never forget who pays the bills. And at the end of the day, if we want businesses to survive and thrive and prosper in this country, who want new investors to come in, then we've got to move this transition forward in a way that takes account of the bills. But it's not just, though, for you as people who are paying the bills that you're here. Many of you are going to have a significant role to play in this growth agenda. One of the things which I want to do as Energy Minister is to focus much more on what this is bringing in terms of growth, of jobs, and the opportunities to transform many parts of our country as we move forward. Now, energy security is the building block. That you can't have affordability, you can't have low carbon if you haven't got energy security. And as part of securing that, we shouldn't be too reliant on one technology. We're not in a position in this country where we need to be reliant on one technology. And so having a balance in the mix is an important part of that process. So first of all, we want to see new nuclear coming forward. New nuclear as a low-carbon mass generation source has a significant role to play. And I think actually taking forward the work which John Humphrys did when he was Secretary of State, and with taking the politics out of this, we've now created in Britain one of the most attractive markets in the world for new build nuclear. We've said we won't subsidise it, but we will remove the barriers, the planning barriers, the regulatory justification issues. We've said we won't compromise on safety and security, which is why we've had one of the most robust processes post-Fukushima to see what lessons we should be learning in the United Kingdom as part of that process. And we've identified 8 sites around the country which could permit 16 gigawatts of new nuclear power to be built by 2025. And each one of those plants is 5,000 jobs. Perhaps 10% of that is nuclear engineering, 90% of it is basic civil engineering and construction. And so huge job opportunities for people in this country. Alongside that, we want to see a major rollout of renewables. It is scandalous that Britain is third from bottom in the EU in terms of our use of renewables. We're ahead of just Luxembourg and Malta. And therefore, we need to move well up that table. And we need to, as government, make sensible, often tough, but realistic choices about which of the technologies which are going to be best. It's very easy to have targets, to have ambitious targets. It's part of government's job to raise ambition. But what we should be doing alongside that is putting in place a roadmap, which we published a few weeks ago, so you know what we need to do by what dates, and we know what we expect others to do if we're going to meet those targets. I think that's a critical point to being able to meet it. And that does mean we focus on the technologies which will deliver the most in terms of the return on investment and deliver that electricity generation at the lowest cost to consumers. Onshore wind is part of it, but we need a different relationship between onshore wind and the communities which host them. Too often there is a sense that these are imposed in our communities and there is no benefit for them. And we're determined through the changes which we're making, through the retention of business rates, through the planning changes more generally, to make sure there is much greater local community ownership and involvement in those wind farms as they go forward. Offshore wind is a key player as well. We already have more offshore wind around the United Kingdom than any other country in the world. Last year, almost 95% of the wind turbines erected offshore were in British waters. And that is an area where, again, we can make huge gains. But we've got to drive down the costs from about £190 per megawatt hour to £100 a megawatt hour towards the end of this decade. And if we can do that, then we can see a massive expansion of offshore wind, and we're working with industry to see how best we can bring those costs down. And then the role for biomass as well, because of its predictability, because of the availability, and this dispatchability. It's there when you need it, you can turn it up when you need more generation. So all of those have a role to play, and investing too in the technologies of the future, the marine, the tidal wave technologies, which aren't mature yet, but in the 2020s can be a significant part of this. We're looking too at the role of interconnectors, and new interconnectors to Norway, to Iceland, to continental Europe, to Ireland, so that we don't always have to rely on our own generation of electricity to meet our demand, seeing how we can use the resources more generally available in Northern Europe in order to meet demand and to follow those patterns as they switch from country to country. So we will absolutely be rolling forward on renewables, and we'll be shortly be consulting on the appropriate level of the renewable obligation, the main funding mechanism, to ensure that that is giving the right level of support to reflect the cost changes in those different areas. We want Britain to lead too in carbon capture and storage, and so we should. We have every availability for that. We have the sequestration sites in the North Sea, we have the skills base, we have the academics who write many of the learned papers. We've allocated £1 billion to the first project. There are discussions going on with Scottish Power about delivering that at Longannet in Scotland, and that we hope that will come to a fruitful conclusion. But we're also committed to 3 more projects by 2020, looking at different technologies, and critically looking at the role of CCS on gas, because gas has got to be an important part of the mix going forward. We can't build a nuclear power station before 2019. We can't see that mass rollout of renewables until the middle or end of this decade. We can't see CCS on coal on a commercial level until the end of this decade. But my crunch is coming in 2018, 2019. And so we need more gas, and we need to make sure that there is a long-term investment structure for it to give us the security which we need and to ensure that we can take forward that technology as well. Now, all of that £110 billion in these next 9 years has to be paid for. It's not coming from government. It has to be paid for through industry, through business investing in those areas. So the other part of the equation is we have to work with you to bring down the volume of energy, the number of units of energy which you will be using. And that's why the Green Deal is the centrepiece of our energy bill going through Parliament at the moment, with an unparalleled commitment to energy efficiency, both in our homes and in our businesses. It's why we're doing more to encourage microgeneration through feed-in tariffs or the renewable heat incentive coming in place soon for businesses and next year for residential properties as well. It's why we're looking at the role of the carbon reduction commitment, to focus people's attention on how they can reduce energy commitment, but to simplify that whole process because the bureaucracy has been too overwhelming. In just 1 year, we in DEC have reduced our carbon emissions by over 20%, simply by involving all of our workforce in looking at how we can do things better. No extra money being spent, just finding better ways of doing it. And it just shows how much can be achieved through collective effort if we're trying to make sure we use things like voltage optimization, using better use of resources in order to reduce our running costs. And as well involving the rollout of smart meters, so we can let technology through that and smart grids play its role in managing demand and reducing costs more effectively. So I hope that what we've done is to recognize the challenge which is there, a challenge which I think had been put off for too long. We've shown a real commitment to deliver security of supply in a genuinely low-carbon way, and we're focusing at the whole time on how we deal with that in a way that helps businesses to both prosper through the new jobs agenda and to make sure that their bills don't go up too much to pay for it. We've got to get energy off the energy pages of newspapers and onto the front page, because this is one of the most exciting opportunities this country is facing. It is literally hundreds of thousands of jobs in the energy and the energy efficiency sector that can be created in the course of this decade. And we as government are determined to put in place the mechanisms that will really drive that investment and will make this country the most attractive place to invest. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charles. I can tell you one way of getting energy off the front, off the energy pages and the business pages and onto the front pages, and that is when the lights start going out. Then you'll be on the front pages. And I don't think I've found anybody credible who believes that your target of 30% renewable energy generation by 2020 is anything other than a pipe dream.
Well, that you'll find plenty of people within industry who believe it's achievable. Nobody says it's easy.
Let me ask these people.
Yeah.
How many of you believe that 2020 is a realistic target to achieve 30% electricity generation through renewables? Put your hand up if you believe that. I can't see any, Charles. No. I'm looking. Can't see any.
Looking as well at some of the companies who are looking at to be some of the major investors, so that's quite interesting too. That we've clearly got to persuade people of the importance of it. We've got to persuade people of its achievability and its affordability. But that at the same time that we need that balanced energy mix. Last year, for 7 months, Sizewell B was out of operation and didn't produce a single unit of electricity. During that time, wind was powering hundreds of thousands of homes. And so that as part of a balanced, secure energy mix, that we need to have a range of different technologies. But what we've tried to do is, rather than saying, let's have a little bit of everything, let's focus on the technologies which can get us most of the way there. And what we did in the renewable roadmap was absolutely to set out the bands which we need to achieve for different technologies.
But why did we go so much further than other countries? Why did we say we will do more of it than anybody else?
Well, we didn't. It was a legally binding European Union agreement.
We went beyond it.
We haven't. We've gone to the European Union target for the United Kingdom is 15% of all energy from renewable sources. And because of the volume of that which is electricity, then that translates into 31% of our electricity from renewable sources. We have not gone beyond that, what was required in the directive. And that was sort of parcelled out according to what people could achieve and where they were in different countries.
I want you to come in and... Yeah, gentleman there put his hand up. Yes, please.
You said about stopping the lights going off, keeping them on. I'm trying to turn them off in order to save energy.
Yeah, well, we need to have some on,
therefore,
don't
can
we?
we ask about the Green Deal? Will small and medium enterprises be able to help with administer Green Deal in addition to just very large organisations?
We have to use small and medium-sized enterprises, the skills which they have, the contribution which they can make towards delivering on energy efficiency. This is a perfect area for small and medium-sized enterprises to be involved in that process. We need policies which will both ensure we have enough generation to meet demand, and therefore we have to keep the lights on, but we also have to have policies which will make it easier to have them switched off. They're not incompatible with each other, but small SMEs have a critical role to play in delivering this.
Question back there, yes, sir.
Charles, you mentioned the fact that you have to protect British industry from the large price increases that we are likely to see because of the moving towards the Green Deal, the greening of our energy. What you haven't mentioned on there is dealing with some of the market abuses that are perpetrated by the usual suspects amongst the big six and others, the rolling people over onto prices that are sometimes twice the going market rate, just the tip of the iceberg, as we've told you many times before, and I'm sure you're well aware of. What are you going to do to actually give Ofgem a kick up the backside to make them actually do something useful?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is make clear the different responsibilities of Ofgem and government. Our job is to set policy, to set the framework, and Ofgem's job is to be a truly independent, powerful, strong regulator with teeth to operate within that framework. They have, I think, been using those powers rather more. It's, I think, the ways in which they're looking at liquidity issues, how they're going to get more players into the market, how they're going to tackle some of those abuses, I think shows that they are recognising that their role is changing. But we do need to have that strong independent regulation. their role has primarily focused on the role of domestic consumers. And I think we also need to look about how that should apply to business consumers as well, to give them the same sort of protection which householders can expect.
Yeah, hi Charles. So you may recall 2 years ago we met and I told you about shale gas. At that point you were fairly ignorant about it. But looking forward, because of course it is surging forward, don't we run the risk that in 3-4 years you're going to have an energy policy based on high prices and security of supply, which shale gas and gas in general seems to be solving?
We're looking, I mean, I set out in my speech the role which gas needs to play going forward. Most of the plant which has been consented, 60% of the plant consented but not yet built, is gas. And that reflects industry's interest in the gas because of its availability globally, its cost structure at the moment, the fact that shale gas has transformed the picture for gas. I think it is a global changer, but I'm not sure it's a domestic changer in the same way. We have greater complications in this country because of land ownership issues. In the States, you own the land under your home, that you can get permission from landowners. Here it's owned by the Crown. Here you've got to get permission from the individual landowners to go underneath it. Separately, you don't have to do it to drill under people's property in the States. We're much more densely populated. So I think it's going to be slower to take off in the United Kingdom than it will be in countries like Poland and China and the United States. But it no doubt has transformed the global situation, with America now looking at how it will export gas again rather than just purely be an importer.
All right, there's somebody behind you. What about?
In terms of current compressors and compressors in the UK and leakage management, what I find is that at the moment the UK manufacturing companies are not doing anything. Is there any process to maybe put a directive in or legislation that people should now start looking at leakage in compressors, which is a great way of turning down units?
Well, we have to look at a balance between encouragement and requirements. That if you look at what happened to household boilers, it was a requirement to change them over time which transformed it. And it simply would not have happened even with the efficiency of modern boilers. That wouldn't have happened in the same way. What we're looking at, the measures we're putting through, is where things will happen simply because you make people more aware of it and they decide to go out and spend the money because of the return they're getting, where there needs to be some form of incentive and to encourage change, or where you need to use regulation. Regulation is our backstop. It's not our preferred way of trying to do things, but the need to secure change, the need to deal with energy efficiency with the urgency which it is there, then will require some extra regulation as well.
All right, one more very quick question. Yeah.
Charles, I wonder whether you could comment on the fact that when David Cameron launched the fourth carbon budget in May, he said, in terms of energy pricing, we need to make sure we do not damage our country's competitiveness. Isn't that already happening? If you look at what's happening with cement manufacture and chlorine manufacture, our energy price is already too high compared with our competitors.
Well, we've actually, it depends on if you're looking at electricity or gas. Gas, we've still got just about the cheapest industrial gas prices in Europe. Electricity, we're certainly more expensive than places like France because they're dependent on nuclear. We're now putting across government a strategy together from Treasury, Department of Business and ourselves comprehensively at the issues affecting energy users, because it would be madness to have policies which drove abroad successful British companies because of the cost of energy.
Would you accept that is happening?
I think that they're looking to where energy is going to be cheaper, but what we are determined to try to keep them here, because they would go elsewhere in the world where their carbon emissions would probably be higher. We'd have lost the jobs, we'd be having to re-import the products, and it doesn't make sense to do that. So having an industrial strategy which looks at those particular energy costs is what we will be publishing in the next couple of months.
Charles, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Hendry.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles.